Here. Also welcome everybody who's watching on our live stream, and if you want to get engaged in the live stream or if you want to get engaged on social media, the hashtag is #SameChance, and if you could add that to all of your comments, it'll help us collate them and also increase the chance of it getting some notice as it begins to trend. This morning we have a fascinating lineup of speakers and panelists to discuss various aspects of autistic life from a range of different points of view and from a range of different parts of the autistic community. So an autistic person, a parent who themselves is autistic, but we also have those who are involved in policy, and we have those who are involved in advocacy, and we'll, as the morning goes on, get a sense of what are the big issues in those areas. Before all of that, though, I mentioned him earlier on, and my admiration for him for some time. He is going to talk to us to give us the results of this year's Same Chance report, which of course is available this morning and being launched today. And he's also going to share the latest poll on what the public thinks about autism and address if awareness of the issues surrounding autism is growing or isn't. So will you please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to the CEO of AsIAm, Adam Harris.
Good morning, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you here to the Royal College of Physicians today as we mark World Autism Month and the launch of the Same Chance report. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces, so many new friends, and such a cross-section of our community and key stakeholders here with us this morning. We so appreciate the time that you're all giving to be with us. And I also want to say a big thank you to those joining us on the live stream around the country as well. We can obviously only have a certain portion of the community in the room here today, but we very much want everybody to be part of the discussion and part of the campaign over the course of the month of April. So please do follow the proceedings this morning, and do please join in the discussion using the hashtag #SameChance. I want to begin by just welcoming Minister James Brown, who's joining us here today. We so appreciate Minister Brown representing the government here today and giving of his time. Minister Rabbitte really wanted to be here and unfortunately has experienced a family bereavement, and our thoughts are with her at this time, but we really appreciate Minister Brown stepping in. Before I go any further, I also want to say an enormous thank you to the President of the Royal College of Physicians, Professor Mary Horgan, who very kindly has donated the use of this magnificent setting this morning, which I think makes the event really special, and we're so appreciative to the College for giving of the facility here this morning. I think it's fair to say that this period of the year is a very special time of the year for AsIAm and for the broader autism community. 9 years tomorrow, AsIAm was launched, so we're nearly approaching a decade of activity. And I suppose it's around this time every year that we begin to reflect on how the organisation has grown and the impact that we're having on the ground. And even since we gathered at the Aviva Stadium in and around this time last year to mark World Autism Month, the growth of the organisation has been exponential. We have supported well over 3,000 people through our autism information line as autistic people navigate the barriers that present in day-to-day life. We now have over 1,000 autistic people and families accessing group-based supports in AsIAm, free supports that people can self-refer to and access support around key issues they might be experiencing, or indeed addressing the loneliness that is so often pervasive within our community. But of course, April itself is World Autism Month and has a broader significance for the entire autism community. And we recognise in AsIAM it presents a huge opportunity for us to engage with the public, to engage with decision makers, and to have a conversation around what autistic rights in Ireland really look like and how they're realised on the ground. I also know, though, however, for many within the autism community, Autism Month can actually be a little bit jarring. There can be that sense of everybody coming on board for the month, lots of commentary on social media, lots of events, but what really changes? And I think that really is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve here this morning and with the launch of the Same Chance campaign. We have done a poll of attitudes of the Irish public to autism, and every day during World Autism Month, we're going to be releasing one of those poll findings to reflect, I suppose, on some of those increases in awareness, but also some of the areas where we still have work to be done. But I think it's been very clear for some time, the work of awareness raising around autism is very nearly reaching completion. Nearly everybody has heard of autism. Most people report knowing somebody who is autistic. So the purpose of April isn't to raise awareness of autism, it's to take that awareness and turn it into action. Because I think what we know is real is that autistic people face pervasive barriers in society that others just simply don't see. And as an organisation, as a result, in AsIAm, we have, I suppose, a number of ambitions into how we want to use the next 4 weeks. Critically, we want to start a conversation around what it means to be autistic in Ireland, but we also want to build a bridge, I suppose, between the experience of being autistic in Ireland and very often the goodwill that exists out there, the desire to learn more, and how we can bridge that gap, I suppose, between awareness and knowledge and practice. But critically, what we want to do is we want to build capacity with our partner organisations and build capacity within the autism community to address these very real barriers that exist. And I suppose one of the things that I think in how we will realise that, it's really threefold. First and foremost, in the findings that I will share with you in a few moments, they are stark. But what I think really stands out for us in the organisation today, but indeed in the work that we do throughout the year, is that despite the barriers that autistic people face, we are dealing with an incredibly resilient, strong, and very often proud community. And I think while we need to highlight the barriers that exist this month, it's as important that we also celebrate the diversity and brilliance that is the autism community. But we do want to highlight the barriers, not as an end in and of themselves, but because by highlighting them, what we want to ask the public to do is to support us in giving autistic people the same chance. And the public and stakeholders can do that this month in two ways. They can do it through education, through engaging with the campaign, with our social media, with the information we'll be putting out there to help everybody in society understand the role they have and can play in removing barriers for autistic people. Critically though, people can also help remove those barriers by supporting the work that AsIAm does. Just to stand still, just to do the work we're doing now in supporting autistic community members and delivering training around the country, we need to raise about €2 million a year. However, we have an ambition to do so much more. For every one group we're running, for every one person we're supporting at present, we could be supporting many multiples. We have an ambition by the end of 2025 to have cumulatively supported 25,000 autistic people and families across the country. But that will only be possible with the support of the Irish public. So as a vehicle to achieve these aims over the course of World Autism Month, we will be launching our Same Chance campaign. And this is very much building on, I suppose, the achievements of the last number of years and on the platform that we developed last year. And I suppose what we're trying to do really when we talk about the Same Chance campaign is what we're trying to do, I think, is in engaging the public over the course of April, helping people to understand that it's not actually about learning the facts of autism. Very often, I think complexity can nearly make people step back and disengage. And facts are important, but facts actually only get us so far. An understanding of autism isn't about a recitation of facts. Rather, it's about understanding the autistic experience in Ireland, what it actually means to be an autistic person or a family member here in Ireland. And I think what's really important about the Same Chance campaign and the message that we're trying to send out there is that everybody understands the concept of equality. And we very much live in an age where that is being prioritised and talked about more and more. But even at that time where we're talking about diversity and inclusion so much more, there's a reality that the barriers autistic people face very often go unseen, unrecognised and unchallenged. And what our Same Chance campaign aims to do is to bring those stark realities to the fore. Not to be negative, but because the stark realities autistic people face are not inevitable. The AsIAm team on a day-to-day basis deals with issues as diverse as bullying, as discrimination, as unemployment, none of which actually are a requirement of an autism diagnosis. And I suppose by working together, we can address these not inevitable barriers. It is in our hands to do so. Small changes make a big difference, and throughout the month, we will be highlighting what those small changes are. So what are these barriers that we're talking about? We think it's really important that we evidence what we're talking about this month. And as a result, we've collected 3 distinct data sets that we'll be using to communicate to the public over the course of Autism Month. Earlier this week, we were delighted to publish the Autism in the Workplace report in partnership with Irish Jobs. This documented the experiences of both autistic employees and candidates and the experiences of businesses seeking to access autistic talent. Later and throughout the month, as I've alluded to, we will be publishing our Attitudes to Autism poll, showing, I suppose, the temperature or the level of knowledge of understanding of autism amongst the general public. But today, perhaps we're going to publish the critical data set, and that is our Same Chance report. And it's our largest ever collection of data from the autism community. Very generously, 1,603 autistic people and family members have fed into this report, have shared their very personal experiences of life with autism in Ireland. We have about a third of people answering from their own direct experiences as autistic people, and we have the remainder of the survey filled out on behalf of autistic children or on behalf of autistic adults who may not have been able to complete the survey themselves. And that aims to show, I suppose, the diversity of our community and the many different issues that present across the board. So I just need my clicker turned on, I think. The Same Chance report, there's copies of which are available today, covers a broad range of topics from across Irish society. And I just want to present some high-level findings this morning, perhaps some of the key takeaway points to get the conversation going. So when it comes to attitudes to autism, it is very clear that there is a disconnect between what the public think they understand about autism versus the lived experience of autistic people on the ground. 90% of our community do not believe that the general public understand enough about autism. And this is really critical when it's understood that very often the barriers autistic people are facing, what people are pointing to is a lack of understanding or indeed a presence of judgment. When we talk about life in the community and what it's like to live as an autistic person in the community, there's something of a mixed picture. People are saying that, maybe a little bit more than half, when we ask them to mark out of 5, are saying they live in a community that is inclusive or that they feel accepted somewhat within the community. But that is a far from universal picture. We see that the community continues to face pervasive accessibility barriers. And while a lack of services in and of themselves are preventing the participation of autistic people in the community, we see there's a broader picture as well. Judgment and attitude continues to be the largest single accessibility barrier, but that's closely followed by issues such as communication and sensory processing. Discrimination is an all too common experience within the autism community, and over a third of autistic people say that they have experienced discrimination over the last 12 months. When we look at our education system, and this is a topic that is a recurring theme within our community, and I'm conscious as we're in the month of April and we begin to approach yet again the question of where will people go for school in September. And we can see already that over 20% of the community are saying that they don't have a suitable school place. But it's important to say, even for those who have a school place, inclusion is not just the presence or absence of a seat in the classroom. And over 60% of our community do not believe, based on their own experiences, that the education system in Ireland is inclusive. When we look to healthcare, and when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about both disability services, but actually also access to healthcare on a day-to-day basis, parity of access to healthcare. In excess of 70% of our community do not believe the healthcare system is accessible. It's clear that there's particular barriers for autistic people seeking to access mental health care. These barriers that exist in both the public and private sectors are often unacknowledged and present very significant barriers for autistic people when people are most in need of care and support within their lives. Within autism services, it will be of no surprise to people in this room that it remains a significant challenge for families in particular to access the sort of services that are required. 70% of children captured in our survey do not receive any supports at present from their CD&T teams. It's important, however, when we talk about autism that we don't get captured in service land, that we don't just see autistic people as people who receive education and healthcare services. Indeed, the reality is very often where autistic people experience barriers, they are even more heightened than what might be experienced by the general public. So we hear about the housing crisis at the moment, we hear about the cost of living crisis, and perhaps what we don't realise is that when general society is facing a crisis, that is often really pronounced within our community. So indeed, when we ask the question around suitable housing within our community, about a quarter of people did not believe their present housing situation met their needs. That includes autistic adults who don't have the opportunity to live independently, and it also includes autistic children often living in housing that does not meet their sensory requirements. We know that there is a significant cost to raising a child on the autism spectrum or to being an autistic adult in Ireland. And well over 70% of our community said that they believed that they faced additional costs on the basis of the fact that they were autistic. And this is important in a community where very often there is a direct link between being autistic and experiencing poverty. Autism and employment is probably the great barrier that our community faces into over the next decade, as we see a generation of autistic people age out of school and move into the community and have the rightful expectation of work. We know that well over 80% of autistic people are unemployed or underemployed. And I think it's very telling when you listen to our community that some 96% believe that the fact that you are autistic would make it more challenging for you to access the workplace. This represents obviously a devastating loss for autistic people and family members, but it also represents a massive loss of brilliance and skill and expertise within our society. Everybody has the right to feel safe and included within the community. But when we ask our community about feeling safe within the community, it's something of a mixed picture. Over a third of people do not feel safe going out and about by themselves, feel judged, perhaps have been experiencing being hassled or being discriminated against. And this obviously really impacts on a person's ability to participate within the community. I suppose, how do we bring all of these findings together in one place when we ask the community a very simple thing? The autism community is asking for no more or no less than the same chance. And yet the reality is that in excess of 80% of autistic people do not believe that our community enjoys the same chance within society. Throughout the report, I think there's two key call to actions. It's very clear that there's a role for government in terms of investment. And we know this is a key time for the autism community as we face into the first Autism Innovation Strategy and the report of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Autism. It is of note that 96% of community members surveyed said they support the government legislating to provide for a national autism strategy to address these systemic barriers that autistic people face. But it's important this Autism Month that we don't just point to others, that we don't just say the government should do something, because the only way we can actually achieve true inclusion for autistic people is to have a major shift in how our society works. We need people to recognise this month that small changes do in fact make a big difference. We need people to listen to the voices of autistic people directly in the discussion and the debate over the course of the month. We need people to use this month as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to become an ally and an opportunity to support our work. Throughout this month, there is a plethora of events, of fundraisers, of opportunities to access training and learning about autism. We would urge you to follow our campaign on #SameChance across social media channels and on our website at AsIAm.ie. I just want to thank once again everybody for coming here this morning. I want to say a particular thanks to Lisa on the team who's organised this event here today and has done a wonderful job. And I also want to say a very special thank you to the fantastic work experience students who've really helped us keep everyone on their toes this morning and make this event such a wonderful success. So I just want to say thank you very much and pass you back to Anton.
I want to hark back to actually where Adam started and just congratulate him and AsIAm on almost turning 10, the 9th birthday. It's a tribute to the organisation that it feels like it has been here for so much longer than the 9 years. And it's also a tribute to what they have achieved in that 9-year period. Couple of things from within that I think are worth flagging for what's going to come during the panel discussion. Some of the issues to do with employment and the perceived barriers to employment and the challenges facing autistic people in both recruitment processes and employment. We're going to get into that in a little bit more detail. Mary Riley from Irish Jobs is going to be joining us on the panel and may have some insight into some of those issues. There's also obviously that very stark overall figure that 90% of respondents don't feel that the public understands enough. And I think that's an important differentiator, picking up what Adam said, that difference between awareness being fairly pervasive, understanding not necessarily being so pervasive. The other thing I think that is worth highlighting, and we're going to get into that in some detail, is the things that require direct action, because some of those figures, 61% don't believe the education system is inclusive, 75% don't believe the healthcare system is inclusive, 78% don't believe the social protection system is inclusive, which are obviously policy and governmental bureaucratic matters that require change to bring those numbers down. And that's what we're going to focus on next, because our next speaker can give us some insight into what the policy thinking is and what the future may look like. He's the Minister of State at the Department of Justice and Equality with responsibility for law reform. Will you please give a round of applause to Minister James Brown?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And it's a real honour to be here this morning and to stand in for Minister Anne Rabbitte and to be asked to do so and to mark the launch of World Autism Month for 2023 and AsIAM's Same Chance campaign. Today's event provides an opportunity to come together to celebrate the autistic community in Ireland and indeed further afield. It also provides an opportunity and an occasion to reflect on the unique challenges that autistic people continue to face in their day-to-day lives, and for considering how we, as policymakers and fellow citizens, can play a part in addressing those challenges. My colleague, the Minister of State for Disability, Anne Rabbitte, is very sorry she can't be here this morning and sends her best wishes for this very important event. As Adam pointed out, Minister Rabbitte suffered a bereavement in her family, and I was very honoured, as I said, asked to step in for her in those situations, and our thoughts are with all of Ministers Anne Rabbitte's family. As you know, Minister Rabbitte has consistently voiced her support for national action on autism in her capacity as Minister of State in the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. On behalf of Minister Rabbitte, I would like to thank AsIAM for the important work that you do in supporting the autistic community all year round, but particularly today, as we mark the beginning of World Autism Month. The theme of AsIAM's campaign this year is removing barriers for autistic people to enable them to have the same chances and the same opportunities as everybody else. And I don't think that's a big thing for society to be asked to do. The government is fully committed to ensuring autistic people have the same opportunities as their peers and see this as being central to equal participation and inclusion in our society. This theme is also timely as we continue to progress development of a new national strategy on autism, the Autism Innovation Strategy. This strategy will advance the programme for government's commitment for action on autism. As some of you might be aware, the Autism Innovation Strategy will have as a central objective identifying and seeking to address the bespoke challenges and barriers faced by autistic people. These barriers occur at all stages of life and in all facets of life, from healthcare, education, transport, and employment, among many others. The strategy will seek to adopt a cross-government approach to overcoming all of these barriers. In terms of the intended approach, the Autism Innovation Strategy will identify simple and clear actions that can make a tangible difference to people's everyday lives. Each key pillar of the strategy will be rooted in the aims of increasing awareness, promoting innovative solutions, and empowering autistic people as we seek to make Ireland a more autism-inclusive society. Minister Rabbitte announced the government's intention to develop an autism innovation strategy in 2021. Important progress has been made to date to develop the strategy, and it is intended that it will be delivered this year. In terms of progress to date, in April 2022, an initial public consultation was convened to seek people's views on the main challenges and barriers facing autistic people in Ireland and suggested actions for a future strategy. Views were also sought from the autistic community on preferences around language and terminology. There was a very positive response to the consultation from individuals, from their families, the representative organisations, including from many here in the room today. I'm pleased to say that a report analysing the submissions made as part of the public consultation will now be published in the coming days, and the report seeks to capture the richness of the views and the perspectives collected as part of that consultation. It will feed directly into the first draft of the Autism Innovation Strategy. In late 2022, following an application process, the Autism Innovation Oversight and Advisory Group was formally appointed. This group, which is majority neurodivergent, will play a key role in overseeing the implementation of the strategy and will ensure that the voice of autistic and neurodivergent people, their families, their supporters, and their representatives will be at the heart of what this strategy is about. While important progress has been made to date, we are conscious that more work needs to be done to make autism innovation strategy a reality. Efforts are currently underway to prepare a draft of the strategy and associated actions. In line with our commitments under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it is critical that a strategy be co-designed and informed by the lived experiences of autistic people from different perspectives and different backgrounds. That has underpinned our consultations to date, and once an initial draft of that strategy is completed and prepared, a further public consultation will be convened before the actions in the strategy are finalised, to give everyone interested a further opportunity to have their say on the strategy before it is finalised. While previous governments have looked into developing such a strategy, and indeed organisations such as AsIAm have long campaigned for one, the government will be the first to actually develop it in Ireland. Minister Rabbitte will continue to work collaboratively with colleagues across government during the drafting process in order to ensure that the needs of the autistic community are addressed in a coordinated and a comprehensive manner. This will ensure that the strategy reflects the wide variety of the submissions made, from the importance of ensuring an inclusive educational experience for autistic children to the important role that culture and media can play in shaping positive narratives around autism. It is important that the Autism Innovation Strategy seeks to address the gaps in existing supports and services for autistic people in a way that complements wider disability supports and measures. This has included to date the National Disability Inclusion Strategy and a comprehensive employment strategy for people with disabilities. Our policy approaches needs to be harmonious and they need to work on the basis of mainstreaming supports. This means identifying where the issues facing autistic people are challenges shared with others and where bespoke challenges are existing and need to be addressed. In that context, the recent transfer of functions of disability services from the Department of Health to the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth provides an important opportunity to better align services for people with disabilities, including autistic people, with broader equality policy and Ireland's commitment under the UN CRPD. To conclude, and to mark the occasion of World Autism Month, I want to thank you all for your energy and your attendance here today, and to wish you a very interesting, successful series of discussions. I want to reiterate the government's firm commitment and Minister Anne Rabbitte's firm commitment to advancing the delivery of rights under the UN CRPD, including better recognising and meeting the needs of the autism community in Ireland. This government wants to continue to listen and support, but most of all work with you to make Ireland a more inclusive and a friendly country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And obviously there will be a lot of people hoping that the strategy and that the intent as expressed does fit what Adam talked about that shift from general awareness to significant action. There was an awful lot in the data that we got earlier on. And I should say, by the way, if you haven't had a chance to have a look at the report after the session, it's worth reading for the additional data that's in it, but also for it is peppered throughout with the personal experience and quotes from those who were interviewed for the report, and it adds an awful lot of colour and insight into the experience of the individuals from which the quantitative research was drawn. We're going to get into a discussion now around some of what that report has revealed, and I'll ask my panel to join me up here if they would be so willing, and when they come up, as they come up. Oh, have I? Ah, there I am, I'm back. Come on up, guys, if you'll grab a seat, and I'll introduce everybody as they come up and sit down. We have going, let me see, from your left to right, we have Mary Riley, who is from Irish Jobs. Earlier this week, Irish Jobs, of course, released a report that stated that 60% of people with autism are afraid to open up about their diagnosis in the workplace, and 80% would be more likely to disclose if they felt confident that they would be supported by their employers. Next, then, we have Stephen Ford. Stephen is an autistic award-winning director and writer with more than 10 years' experience in screenwriting, and he has taught filmmaking to many neurodiverse young people in the Roscommon Youth Project, and he's also carer to his autistic daughter. Then next we have Maggie Green. Maggie is a lecturer in education at Hibernia College. Prior to this, she was a practicing primary school teacher. She was for several years on secondment with the NCSE, the National Council for Special Education. She was the recipient of the John Smith Doctoral Scholarship in 2022. And her current research is the phenomenological study of the lived experience of the autistic, trans and non-binary community in the Republic of Ireland. And I have to say, my big concern for the last several hours has been the word phenomenological and would I be able to say it? So it is a huge relief that I managed it. Next we have Fiona Ferris, who is Deputy CEO of AsIAm and Head of Training, and she's been with AsIAM since 2017, and her expertise covers a range of issues including autism and women, neurodiversity, disability rights, employment, accessibility and education. And then at the far right we have Senator Micheál Carrigy, who is chair of the Oireachtas Committee on Autism that has been sitting since last May, and that committee is due to issue its final report in the coming months. And obviously, undoubtedly, most of the people I would imagine in this room are looking forward to hearing what that report has to say. Let us begin then, if Stephen is willing, with Stephen. You are both autistic yourself and the parent of an autistic child, which means some of the lived experience that has been cited in the report will undoubtedly gel with your own experience. What struck you in what you've heard so far?
A lot of it, to be honest, a lot of it struck me. It was very, even though I'm autistic and my daughter's autistic, so we know kind of all this stuff already, it was still very upsetting to read and very, shocking to read as well. But I would say the number, one of the things, I couldn't pick just one, but one of them is the 90% feel that people still don't understand autism, which I see, all the time with myself and my daughter, is that there's still a huge, lack of understanding out there. So that something needs to be done about that. And I mean, things like, 96% want the government to, to come up with a national autism strategy, which kind of speaks volumes in itself, and then things like, barriers for inclusion in school and stuff. I've experienced all this myself and my daughter and stuff, and, school, especially for autistic children, is such a big thing. That's something that I don't know, that's going to be a hard thing to change, but things like inclusion in school is really important, even my daughter, the school she's in now, this is their third school, and even then we still have barriers all the time trying to get through for her, and it's just, it's ongoing, and the school system, would probably have to be completely flipped on its head, because the way things have been done for maybe the last 30 or whatever years doesn't work for autistic children, so yeah, it was very shocking to read, and there was so many different things. The 12%, only 12% feel that the media portrayed them as respectful and as positive. I think is important as well, because most of the information we get is from news, is from social media, from radio and stuff like that. So that probably actually struck me more than anything else, was that 12%, because I think that goes a long way to neurotypical people understanding more about autism and stuff. So there was so much, I could go on and on. There was so many things shocked me. Inclusion for on transport and public transport, which is something I hadn't thought about before, because I myself am terrified of public transport. That's something that could be looked at, and that could probably be, I don't know how now, but that's something that could probably be sorted out fairly soon. But yeah, it was just, overall there was so much of it. It was just shocking, and upsetting.
Can I ask, Stephen, you said the thing about the understanding being something that you and your daughter had come up a lot with. And going back to what Adam said about that shift between general awareness to real understanding, what are the kind of misunderstandings that you have seen? What are the issues that you see with
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that, for instance, some of the stuff we've been through would be, the usual is you don't look autistic. So some people think that there's a certain thing that you do or a certain way you're supposed to look that must mean that you're autistic. I've had people say, autism, things like, what level are you? Whereas I don't consider there to be kind of levels. And it's not like being bad. It's not like really being like malicious or anything. It's just a complete lack of understanding that, you know, people don't really know. Like I had an incident recently with my daughter is doing camogie, and the coach was talking to me, and I said she's autistic, and he said, oh, you wouldn't notice, like physically, you wouldn't notice any that she's autistic, you know. And I was kind of like, oh God, like, you know. So it's very it's just things like that, you know. But it's not in a bad way. People don't always mean it really bad. It's just that seems to still be a lack of understanding, which you wouldn't think there would be with the amount of, you know, kind of information that AsIAm put out and other people, other organisations and stuff. You would think by now that, you know, but I mean, 90% of people still feel the public don't understand them. And then that goes a long way to, you know, one of the really bigger issues, which is not feeling safe in your community, which obviously whether you're autistic or not, you should be able to feel safe in your community. And obviously autistic people don't feel safe, you know, stimming in public and things like that, because the lack of understanding is there. It all kind of connects, you know?
Yeah, because what goes to the heart of somebody feeling secure, feeling safe, feeling welcome, feeling part of a community is feeling that those around them actually understand their experience. Let me go to Senator Micheál Carrigy, because he's chaired the Oireachtas Committee. You sat through a number of sessions. You've obviously heard submissions. Many of the people in this room would have, or rather many of the people from whom you would have heard are in the room today. In terms of prioritising actions from what you've heard today and from what you've heard in the committee, what do you see as the main priorities? What do you get to first?
Well, first of all, Anton, I want to thank everybody. I know I've seen a lot of familiar faces here today, and I thank everybody that actually came to the Oireachtas Committee to give evidence. When the committee was set up, we wanted to have as much of the lived experience as possible, so that whatever recommendations we would make would be there, would benefit families, benefit young adults, benefit young children. But I think,
and out of curiosity, sorry to cut across you, does the evidence that you heard at the committee square with what you heard today in the report?
Yeah, well, I think the 90%, you know, that people feel they're not getting that same chance, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have is to inform society, and I think there's a responsibility on us as legislators to take a lead in that, and it's actually a project we are working on the 26th of April in conjunction with AsIAM, Leinster House, the government buildings beside us. The process, we will launch the process of it being an autism-friendly parliament, one of the first in the world. And we will be rolling out training across all 1,700 staff, political staff, Oireachtas members, etc. And I know Roisin Deary, the senior person in charge in the Oireachtas, is here today. So that's a huge body of work. But that has been taken on by the Houses of the Oireachtas Commission, and we want to set example. We want to take a lead, and then that we roll that out through all local authorities, through all public buildings throughout the country, but roll out the training to all of us that are in government, that are making decisions, and to make sure that we're informed, and then inform the rest of society. And I think that's important. I have a young autistic son myself, and you know, a lot of the things I see in the report, I've seen it firsthand myself, and I think I have a duty, or I feel I have a duty in my role to make sure that I make a change while I'm in the Oireachtas, and that's a commitment I've given to myself, to my own family, and I'd give to everybody here. I want to see change made, and there was a percentage there with regard to an act, and that's something I'm very, very strong about myself. As I say, it'll be a committee decision, but I know I will be putting forward, and I know Deputy Pauline Tully is here as well. I think it's important that we put that act in law, an empowerment act, similar to the having actually in Malta. Small Mediterranean island is years ahead of us. But we put that act in law and give those rights and accesses to services across housing, education, healthcare, employment. And that has to be done, and that would be a priority number one to me, that we enshrine that in law and give that right.
Going back to some of the numbers in respect of those areas, if we look at the stats, 75% believing the healthcare system isn't inclusive, 78% believing the social protection system isn't inclusive, 61% believing that the education system isn't inclusive, 81% believe that being autistic has made the things that impact on all of us worse, so things like the cost of living crisis. How do you set about prioritising? What is significant change that's needed if that's going to be altered, if those numbers are going to be reduced?
Well, as I said, it's about informing society, but it's also about informing all government departments, to what being an autistic person or autistic family, and you mentioned the cost of living. We've had a number of reports, and we listened to evidence, and particularly from ATU and Sligo, like the average cost for some families is over €20,000 a year in extra expenses, be it paying for private OT, speech and language, a parent having to give up work if there was maybe more than one child in a family autistic. So that, and I've had my discussions with the Department of Social Protection, that needs to be taken into account when they're looking at cases with regard to carers allowance, which comes down to whatever the income is in the house, but they don't take into regard the expenses that's associated for families. You look at even SUSI grants, young children going to college, there's a cut-off point there, but that expense is not taken into account, that extra expense that is on families. And I think that needs to change. It can't just be looked coldly on figures. We have to look at that, and that puts a lot of families in a lot of difficult financial circumstances. So I believe that's one area that needs to change. But we need to inform those people in those departments that are making these decisions of these facts. And to be quite honest, until I got them details at the committee meeting, I wasn't aware of them high costs, etc. That were associated for a family. So it's informing society, and I believe the committee meeting, and it's by families and groups and organisations coming, and young Cara Dermody, the youngest child ever to give evidence to a Oireachtas committee, is here today. That's what people need to listen to. And they are, I firmly believe they are listening. And Minister Brown, I think, gave a very, very strong statement for government that we are committed to implement a strategy. Our report and recommendations will feed into that strategy. I'd be very, very strong on putting legislation in place, an Empowerment Act. I think we need to look at reviewing the Disability Act, which doesn't give a legal right to services for people with disabilities. But I would also like to see that going forward we would have an all-party committee there permanently in the houses of the Oireachtas that would meet on a regular basis to oversee the implementation of our report, the implementation of the strategy, and make sure go into the future and going forward that people get those rights to those services and those same chances that they're entitled to.
We are effectively then talking about two things hand in hand. On the one side, there is the creation and the broadening of understanding. On the other, there is the provision of supports and access to supports as required. Maggie, I'd like to bring you in on this because you're somebody whose family is involved with the AsIAm adult support programme. And if you're willing, I'd like you to explain the support programme and why it is important. Give us a sense of what's more important. Is it public understanding and acceptance or greater support for autistic people and families? And which comes first, or do you have to do them side by side?
I suppose just my son is involved in the children's services with AsIAm, and sorry. This is going to keep doing that. My son is involved, and for him it has been life-changing. He's 10 years old, and he had attended quite a number of different classes and groups in his lifetime. And inevitably, at the end of every single class, someone approached me and said, oh, he didn't have a good time, maybe he could try this next time, maybe he could change this, maybe he could try not to do this. And for him, it was really damaging for his self-esteem, for his self-confidence, for his want to participate in things then, because he felt so excluded and so on the periphery of everything. He felt excluded from his peers, and he saw these adults who were constantly looking for him to change, constantly wanting him to be the person who would make those changes in order to fit in, rather than them making the very small changes that they could make to make things more comfortable for him. And then we found AsIAm. And it took a while to get him to agree to participate. But I have to say Adam Harris had a big bit to do in that, because he watched a video of the alien analogy, and for him, he just said, yeah, this is my place. And he joins in online. We're based in Donegal, so online is the only option for us currently. And every date is put on our family calendar, and he's so excited in the run-up to it. He asks me every single day, several times a day, when am I doing this again? I'd say Niamh is fed up getting emails from me about dates, but he feels really validated when he attends those sessions. He feels seen and he feels heard. He doesn't have to change who he is in order to fit in. He has long hair, and it's a point of contention for many people because he hides behind his hair when he feels uncomfortable, and he's constantly being told to take his hair out of his face. That doesn't happen when he attends for AsIAm. He's allowed to have his camera on, his camera off, his hair in his face, his hood up, his hood down, his snooty on, whatever he wants, whatever he's most comfortable with, and he can communicate in any way he chooses to. So if he wants to type, if he doesn't want to type, if he wants to speak, if he wants to have his mic on or off, none of it's an issue. Whereas in other groups, everything has been an issue. He feels really validated and respected and seen, and therefore he's comfortable. And he is a witty, very quick-witted child who has something to say on everything. He's very, very clever, and people don't often get to see him. But I find, and for me and my husband, when we watch him, and I'm going to get emotional now, but when we watch him, he really feels respected. He really feels comfortable enough to let his humour come through. And he comes off those sessions really happy, just full of joy. And, you know, if that permeates his life, then he has a space where he feels wholly safe, able to unmask and be himself. And that's not something that happens very often for him in his life. And I suppose, I know he asked me another question, so leading into that understanding and acceptance, for me, you know, I suppose in my own lived experience and I'm looking at my son, it doesn't feel, as I mentioned, safe to be wholly yourself all the time, and that's because of those barriers around understanding and acceptance. And people will say, oh, you know, I suppose similar to what Stephen said, he doesn't look like he has autism, or God, are you sure? You know, and you're like, yes, we're perfectly sure. And that's a barrier for him because there's this huge expectation of him, you know, that he's just going to get on with things all the time as well without supports. So the understanding and acceptance piece, I would say that it's really important for the systems that are currently in place to start to change. The onus should not be placed on autistic people to change to fit into these very, very broken systems. And, you know, I read a report, or not a report, a research paper by a researcher called Craig Goodall, and he talked about, as Stephen had mentioned, inclusion being a feeling and not a place. And that's what autistic people should feel in our society. It shouldn't just be that my son feels safe with AsIAm. He should feel safe all the time. He should feel safe to always be himself. And in terms of the services, I mean, I found the report really upsetting when I read it. And similar to what Stephen had said, there's just so much in it that you think we know this, but seeing it down there in print is really, really hard to digest. And, you know, I know when I looked at what one person who had said that they'd been waiting for 51 months for services. And the sad thing is that's not an isolated case. That's too often the case for people. And, you know, families are faced with these struggles, and, you know, to highlight moving into adulthood then, where the services decrease further. Autistic children become autistic adults. It doesn't make sense, you know, for services to decrease further as they get older. The services need to be cohesive, they need to be coherent, they need to be clear, they need to be offered to people. And, you know, it's something that, for me, looking at my family, but also in the work and the research that I do, the autistic community, you know, people can say, oh, we have awareness. Awareness isn't enough. There has to be change. The system needs to be disassembled and built back up again to be inclusive. So
it's a very interesting line, that sentence of inclusion being a feeling, not a place. I think it's an apt time, Fiona, to bring you in. Obviously, both as Deputy CEO and Head of Training and AsIAm, you see a lot of what is happening on the ground. Has there been significant change, particularly in the area of awareness and understanding, and what needs to be done now?
I think it's an interesting question. We've got quite a large team in AsIAm now, which is great. And the majority of our team work directly in supporting autistic people and their families across a range of issues. What's quite different about the training team is that they work indirectly for supporting autistic people with all of the barriers that autistic people face that are nothing to do with autism. They're nothing to do with your diagnosis, the judgment and attitude and the lack of understanding That's the piece of work that the training and accreditation team addresses. Day in, day out, our team are travelling the length and breadth of the country, educating shops, corporates, government buildings, about how to be as accessible and as inclusive as possible. In fact, half of our team can't even be here today because they're out delivering training and talks. We are so incredibly busy, and how great it is that we are so busy, because it means there has been a drastic shift, particularly in the last, I think I've seen it really since 2019, 2020. That space where everybody was working from home, I think gave a lot of businesses and organisations an opportunity to look at how to be more inclusive. They had the space to do it. But just because we are busy and just because we are out delivering training all day, every day, that's not enough. It's not the information that we give you, it's what you then do with that information. Very like awareness isn't enough. We need acceptance. Training isn't enough. It's what you then do with the knowledge, what you take away. So you could be, what I feel is particularly important is that these pieces of inclusion can't exist in silos. There's no point in having the most inclusive, accessible workplace in the world if the public transport system isn't inclusive and you can't get to your job. So we need to be working together as a society. It's really, there's an interdependency there. I know we've spoken a lot about the 90% of the public feel that there's a lack of understanding, and that is very upsetting. But I think the piece that upset me the most, even though it's a smaller statistic, is that 37% of autistic people feel they've been discriminated against in the last year. That's 12 months. Nobody should be discriminated against in their entire lifetime. Yet our community are experiencing that in the space of 12 months, and that's not acceptable. So yes, while there has been an increase in the amount of training and the amount of knowledge that we're delivering and the demand on wanting to become more autism friendly and more accessible, it needs to translate then into people feeling more accepted. And the fact that 83% of autistic people feel like they need to change themselves, they need to mask in order to fit in with everybody else, that just shows that we're still not taking away the knowledge that's been delivered to us and doing something with it. We need real action, so that training piece isn't enough. We also recognise that in AsIAm, we don't know everything about everything. We know a lot about autism and we can do that piece, but there's real power in partnering with thought leaders. So whoever specialises in a particular area, whether it's government change, whether it's retail, whether it's corporate, we want to partner with that organisation and share the knowledge, because that's where the real power and the real change lies. We can't remain static. We can't just say, okay, we've delivered training in every strata of our society, we're good now, because we're not. The statistics have shown that today, and it was a very upsetting report to read, but it's also really important that we put these figures down on paper so that people and society can be held accountable and see, well, we need to make real change here. But everybody needs to realise that they have a responsibility. It's not on everybody who's directly involved. Everybody has a responsibility to do something about it. If an autistic person doesn't feel safe in your community, what can you do about it? Whether you know anything about autism or you know an autistic person or not, what can you do to make real change in this? So that's the piece that I feel very strongly about, is everybody has a responsibility here.
Can I ask in relation to that responsibility, and I don't mean this in any way to be critical of them, rather the opposite. I spend a lot of time on Irish rail trains, and carriage G is the quiet carriage. And I always wonder, is there an element with organisations where there is a sense of, if we have a carriage G, we are ticking the box for our responsibilities? And there's an element of, well, what about the rest of the train and the route through the station and the taxi you get there to arrive and all the rest? Do you find elements of that it is seen as, if you provide a specific service, you've delivered the requirement for your autistic customers, clients, service users?
I believe there is certainly an aspect of that, but I don't think it's done through any ill intention. So sometimes, like businesses or, like you said, Irish Rail have put that in place, feeling that that will meet the needs of the community that they're trying to support, but may not realise, well, in some ways that's further adding to the issue, because that means people can only access this specific support or this specific service at this time, when the rest of society and all the rest of the public can do it anytime. So we would get a lot of requests from companies and retailers saying, we want to do a sensory-friendly shopping time. We're like, that's great, but how about we look at making it more accessible all of the time? And I know Aoife from Pennies is here today. We did a great bit of work with Pennies about nearly 2 years ago now, looking at how we could make shopping accessible all of the time, but for those who perhaps aren't able to attend when it is quite busy with all of those extra supports in place, we will still do a sensory-friendly shopping time. So it is sometimes about putting that in place, but making sure you're putting the effort in place to make things accessible and inclusive all of the time. And again, that just comes from the lack of knowledge and the lack of understanding. I don't think anybody does that to tick a box knowingly. I think sometimes they just aren't aware that a bigger piece of work needs to be done.
Yes, and as I say, I meant that in no way to be disparaging, because the fact of it being done is obviously a very good thing.
Yeah.
But it goes then to, Mary, you might be able to give us some insight into this, because when we talk about accessibility and broad accessibility, some of the figures in relation to job and employment accessibility were very stark. 60% of people feeling that if they declared themselves to be either autistic or neurodivergent, it would significantly impact on their chances to get a job. Were you surprised by that?
No, because from my perspective, when I looked at that data and I saw that particular piece of data jumped out at me, and then I looked at the employer side, which said over half didn't know what reasonable accommodations could be made to support autistic employees, and nearly 60% didn't know where to go to get that information. I thought, well, there's the gap. There's the gap there that needs to be addressed. And that's kind of where we stepped in. There's a mention about partnering and kind of with organizations and advocacy, and that's kind of what we've done with AsIAm. So we kind of have relationships with employers, the length and breadth of Ireland, and employers of all sizes. And I'd like to think, I know Fiona mentioned their training team being super busy at the moment. I'd like to think we played a little bit of a part in making that happen for them, because we've been trying to, or we've been advocating for AsIAm and for training and for awareness. And it does start, in conversations. It starts with training, it starts with awareness, looking at how you hire, how you advertise a job, how you interview, and then once you have somebody in your organization, how you manage that person, how you set tasks for that person, all those kind of areas that need to be addressed and looked at. And employers are kind of looking at it now and taking it seriously. I mean, Adam mentioned there is a cohort of autistic people now coming through the education system, quite rightly with the expectation that they will find employment. So it's on us and we, at Irish Jobs, we've kind of stepped in and stepped up to kind of have those conversations with employers to facilitate that connection with AsIAm and start that process. But it's a journey, and it's the start of a conversation. It's only really started, I think, really properly in 2 years. And there was a moment in time, the pandemic opened that moment where everyone stopped and looked at how they work and looked at their working practices. So there's a chance there to kind of move into that space and have those conversations while the workplace is changing and evolving. And I think we kind of have an opportunity then to start the process to work towards meaningful change for people.
And do you think employers, because the recruitment process, depending on how it's handled, it can lend itself to being a very intimidating environment at the best of times. Do you think that employers give thought to those kind of processes and methodologies with a view to making them inclusive?
I think that's part of the journey that we're on. I think raising, making or suggesting that employers step back and look at those processes, because that's what they've done for years. And they've never considered changing them. So why, when you go for an interview, why are you asked questions that you're not able to prepare for? Like, why is it done like that? Why can't that change? If an autistic person wants to bring somebody with them to the interview, why can't they do that? So it's about questioning the status quo and seeing it kind of small changes, small tweaks can make the process better for autistic people. And I have to say, and I've heard Adam make this point before, those changes would benefit everybody, not just autistic people. So it's about having those conversations, and I think that's where the power lies. I mean, we, within Irish Jobs, we're on this journey too, to be honest with you. And we've been talking about kind of our approach to neurodiversity, and it's spread right across our organisation. So we're we're part of a much bigger organisation across Europe called Stepstone, and we've spoken about kind of what we're doing here in Ireland, and that's kicked off conversations in other parts of our organisation. So within the UK last week, they had a week of speaking about neurodiversity, so speakers and autistic members of staff, and that wouldn't have happened. And I think there's a power in that. I take Fiona's point that there needs to be more societal change, but I think it's on all of us to change what we can change. And if everybody takes that attitude, then together we can make real change in society.
I wonder, is there a particular opportunity at this time, Stephen, just going to what Mary was saying about the working from home and COVID and the shifts that made. I wonder, does it mean that people are now more willing to look at all of the ways in which we all work, the way we all recruit, the way we all promote, and say it doesn't have to be the way it's always been?
Yeah, I think especially since the beginning of COVID, I think people had to work from home, and so I think a lot of people, especially that were working in office, were thinking, well, why can't we work from home all the time? But I do agree with what Mary said, that it's about jobs change and the way the same way they've done things for so long, which isn't easy. Like it's a long process, it's hard to do. And looking at things that they probably never thought, well, why do we ask these questions? Why can't we let someone else go with the person to interview? And things like that. And it's not just about, saying that you're going to be more inclusive. It's about, as Mary said, finding out where to go to find the supports that you can support autistic people that are in your workplace, But I think there's definitely a lot of jobs where people could be working from home and doing just as good a job rather than going in for, I know a few people that, go into work in an office for just one day a week, and they're like, why can't I just work at home for that extra day? So I think maybe that needs to be looked at a bit more, that if you don't need to go in and you can do it from home, and if it suits you and that supports you even better, then you should be able to,
Were you surprised by that figure? Again, to that phrase of inclusivity, inclusion being a feeling. The fact that nearly 2/3, 60% of people in the report said they felt that it would hamper their job prospects if they declared themselves to be autistic. That's a very stark figure, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that wasn't surprising at all, to be honest. Especially with my own experience in the past. I was only diagnosed like a year and a half ago. So I've had tons of jobs and tons of interviews, but I've never had to, I never knew I was autistic, so I never had to disclose that. But I can believe it because it comes back to the lack of knowledge, and I think that's what makes autistic people afraid then kind of revealing that they are autistic, and they're probably thinking, does this person know what even anything about autism? Do they know what that means? Will this affect my chances of getting the job? Because will they think, oh my God, I don't have the supports to put in place for this person? So that wasn't surprising at all, to be honest. Especially, I would say, with younger autistic people, I'd say it's a lot harder as well to, I know if I was in my 20s, and I went for a job interview tomorrow, I would feel a bit more skeptical about, revealing that I'm autistic rather than I'm in my 30s. I think once you pass 30, you stop caring. If I was in...
When do you get to 40?
I think if I went for an interview tomorrow, I think I'd just say I'm autistic. I would just say it because I'm at the stage where I don't care anymore. But I would say it's especially harder on younger people. But in general, no, it wasn't surprising. It was obviously, again, shocking, even though it wasn't surprising, because, a lot of people want to work. A lot of people have to work, and that's a barrier that's stopping them from going and getting jobs. That's a barrier that my own child will have in 10 years' time if it's not, sorted out, that she'll still be afraid. It's the worst thing ever to imagine that when my daughter is, let's say, 20, will these things still be a problem? Will she still go to an interview and be like, I couldn't tell them that I was autistic, These are things that,
Well, that's exactly what we want to change. We want to change that, and remove that fear. And I see, my daughter's autistic. She's in college. She's proud to be autistic. I think there's a lot of people within the community who are proud of their autism, who will tell people they're autistic. She has every expectation that she will get a job when she leaves college. And quite rightly so, to be honest with you. So there is a power in that. I think even, the training, the letting people know that you're receptive to hiring autistic people, having autistic people and staff. The thing that I would say to most organisations is that you have autistic people, you just probably don't know it. You have autistic people working for you, you just don't know it. And that needs to change, So I think the education, the training, the openness, the inclusivity, it all matters. It's all a message, and it's really powerful, and it can change things. And then, as I said, take that in tandem with the autistic people coming through college who are just, who are in training schemes, who are proud to be autistic and are vocal about it. I think put that together, and you have a recipe that will kind of hopefully transform the world of work in the next 10 years.
Yeah. As you were talking and as Stephen was talking, Fiona, I could see you nodding in my peripheral vision. There is much of that you would agree with.
Yeah, there's much of both points I think that I would agree with. I certainly wasn't shocked by the fact that many autistic people find it difficult to disclose or won't disclose because they're worried that they won't be able to access a job. And it doesn't matter how comfortable you are with your autistic identity. The reality is you will have faced stigma your entire life. You will have faced people judging you because they don't understand autism, or underestimating you, or sometimes overestimating what you can do because you don't visibly look like you have any challenges or you experience any differences. I am, for one, I'm incredibly comfortable with my autism diagnosis. And I think if I was facing, a job interview where I wasn't quite sure if it was accessible, if the organisation knew much about autism, I think even I would find it difficult. In fact, the first job interview I ever did where I disclosed that I was autistic was for AsIAm. And that's because I knew, obviously, if you're autistic and you're not supporting AsIAm. And
Did
as
you get
I
any
said,
sense of discrimination during that process?
But it's incredibly difficult. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are with your diagnosis, you're still going to be afraid of the reality, and it is a reality, that you're going to be judged for it. Whether it's going to actually happen or not, you're going to be afraid. So it doesn't surprise me at all. But there are very simple ways of addressing that. And some of the points that Mary made, even in your advertisement, making it clear that this job is accessible and suitable for autistic people, because we're so used to things not being accessible and inclusive that if we don't see it explicitly written and pointed out, we'll think, well, that's not going to be for me. I'm not going to be supported there. They're not going to know. They're not going to understand autism. So it's something as simple as that can instantly remove a barrier.
Can I ask, Michal, in what we are talking about, we're looking at the creation and inculcation of broader understanding. We're looking at the change of workplace practices in private and public employers. We're looking at the provision of services for autistic people and the provision of general services to autistic people in a way that there isn't a barrier by virtue of them being autistic. How do you get all of that done? And how do you get government to focus on all that when there's always another crisis? There's always the next refugee crisis, there's always the next housing crisis, there's always the next inflation crisis. There's always something ostensibly more immediately pressing than that big, difficult thing that needs to be solved over the long term.
Well, I believe government is fully committed. As Minister Brown said earlier, the fact that we are developing an awesome innovation strategy, AsIAm as an organisation is feeding into that. The fact we have a joint committee on a particular disability, this is the first time that it has ever happened. That committee is going to feed in. I'm very confident that, as I say, we are going in the right direction. And as I say, I fully believe government is committed to it. I don't see anything coming in the way. If we set out our strategy, we enact legislation for that support, for the supports, and then when it's enshrined in law, them rights and the supports, then it will be put in place. The finance will be put in place to support all this. But as I say, it's all about societal change, informing society as well. And you just mentioned about employment, and just beside us here in Trinity College, we have a centre for children with autism and intellectual disabilities, and they've set up a programme with 40 national and international companies here, linking in, providing employment. There's a support mechanism there for both the young autistic person going into employment, but also support for the company as well. I think that's something that could be replicated across all third level colleges, and in the country, and all colleges of further education. And I know I've spoken to TUS only there in the last number of weeks that are keen to look and get that support to be able to widen out that and give more job opportunities to young autistic person, because we can contribute so much, and as I say, it's just informing and taking away that stigma or that fear that might be there with some companies. But as I said, we have a fantastic example here just beside us, where so many companies are involved in supporting and providing those opportunities. We just need to expand that across the country. But I really think key is informing society and breaking down the stigma barriers that are there, and be proud of who you are.
Can I ask you one final thing? You talked about the submissions that were made to the committee, including the youngest ever witness to appear in the Oireachtas committee. You might have had a better understanding than some of your colleagues by virtue of your family experience. As you looked at your colleagues on the committee, as you talked to them, what, if anything, surprised them? What do you think changed their views from the evidence that they heard?
I think we have a very committed core group that are members of the committee, a lot with family experiences in education, and to be honest, it's a committee that people looked to be members of because they wanted to be there to make change. It wasn't somebody appointed to a committee. People asked to be on that committee and are invested in that committee and invested in making change. And I think even more so as we've heard the evidence, and particularly I think 3 weeks ago we had a day in the Shannon, first time ever. We had a public Oireachtas committee here in the Shannon chamber where government business was moved aside for the day to allow that, and we had a number of organisations and parents groups in the morning, and then young autistic self-advocates in the afternoon. And I think that was a powerful day, not just for the members, but members of the Oireachtas that were there watching that Oireachtas committee meeting, people that came in as to the gallery there as well to watch that. I think that was very, very powerful to hear that evidence from people, and particularly, as I said, the self-advocates in a seat of government in the Shannon chamber. And I think really that was a very, very powerful day that will make changes.
Not a bad note to draw the panel discussion to a close on. Micheál, Fiona, Maggie, Stephen, Mary, thank you very much. Folks, can you get a round of applause if you will for our panel? Now what I'll do is, folks, I'll let you return to your seats if you're willing. I'm going to do the one thing that I've always wanted to be in life was a roadie. So I'm going to do some small set dressing, if you will. In case you're deeply horrified at the prospect that I'm going to use this chance to finally tap into my musical side and sing to you, you can relax. I'm not going to. We have somebody way better qualified to do that than I am. She is a friend of AsIAm, and she has promised to come and sing us a couple of songs. Will you please welcome Emma Langford.
Hello. It's really nice to be here today. It's a privilege to be here as part of this really, really important event. I had my own autism diagnosis last year in August. I don't really like the word diagnosis, to be honest, but I was identified as autistic last year in August. So this is my first time coming out formally. Thank you very much. It's also very nerve-wracking. I'm going to play 2 songs for you. The first one is a song called A Song for My Younger Self, and it's one that I put on my latest album. It's one I wrote about when I was 12 years old and nearly lost my voice. And singing is being creative is all I've ever known as a way of expressing myself. Otherwise, expressing myself is not great. So this song was written to my 12-year-old self who had to give up singing for a number of years so that I could have a career in music. So I'm very grateful to her. And it's sort of a thank you letter to her for doing that and for giving me a chance at, being who I am now. And I'm going to follow it then with a song called All You Want, which is a thank you letter to my current self and a reminder to my current self to take everything, life, all your choices at your own pace, and not to worry about when anyone else thinks you should be doing anything, because we get faced with that quite a bit, I think. It's also cool being introduced by Anton Savage, because when he was on the radio, I was always like, oh my God, Anton Savage is so cool. Finally, got to do a show with Anton Savage. I never thought I'd be where I am, so who knows where we'll be tomorrow. I think now and then of my younger self, a sweet green girl with her joy and her sorrow. I work every day to make her proud. Her voice was broken, so I sing aloud. Every moment of the day that I second guess, every step I've taken to where I stand, is a moment borrowed, is a moment blessed by a sweet green girl with a pen in her hand. I work every day to make her proud. Her voice was broken, so I sing aloud. I work every day to make her proud. Her voice was broken, so I sing aloud. I speak to the world with a voice I've earned, spread my seeds in fertile soil. Young ears listen and young minds learn, while our old hearts cool and our old blood boils. I work every day to make her proud. Her voice was broken, so I sing aloud. I work every day to make her proud. Her voice was broken, so I sing aloud. I work every day to make her proud. Her voice was broken, so I sing aloud. There is nothing stunning about me, no illusions or delusions for the world to see. Voice like velvet floating to the floor, make it a dress when I care less no more. You say we may not be perfect, but in good time we'll work it out. You should get a job, marry, do it all in the right time. Waltz in circles before walking the line. Is this all you want? Is this all you need? Ooh, is this all you need? I have no GPS, no plan for this life, no sense of direction and no sense of time. What good is navigation? Every day is a revelation. This head might be crazy, but at least it's mine. And that's all you want. And that's all you need. Is this all you want? Is this all you need? And now's the time to redefine the things you thought you knew. It's technically a waltz if anyone feels like dancing. Flirt outright with the wrong guy, be the one to tie his tie. Wish on passing cars, laugh at shooting stars. Just be stupid, sometimes get burnt in the summertime. If that's all you want, and that's Thank you so much. I don't actually know if I'm performing once or twice today. Is it the once? No idea. Once. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to finish with this song. This song is called Goodbye Hawaii. It was funny. I was trying to decide what songs to sing today, and I was like, oh, what songs do I have that are about my experience? And then I realized that literally all of them. So this song is called Goodbye Hawaii, and it's about ostensibly about a breakup, but actually it was about trying to fit as many big words into a song as possible, and learning about compromise in relationships and how much compromise is possible in a relationship when you are very sure of who you are. You know the funny thing about the day you realize who or what you are is that by the time it happens, you're probably not that anymore. And the funny thing is logic states for some things to break, they first must fall. And like any small or precious thing, you give nothing or you give all. I can't give you any more than that. I don't trust my clumsy feet not to make me fall flat, and the heart's the only muscle tissue, little known fact that don't know how to heal itself if you cut it in half. So don't cut it in half. We spend our days in endless cycles of lust to oxytocin, never stopping to think about the space between us that we've chosen. Well, I can give my mouth my ear, but I can't give you my hand, 'cause though you're oh so understanding, you can never understand. I will hand you sellotape and super glue and staples, and I'll help you hold those pieces in place till you're fit and able. I could never be a surgeon, 'cause my stomach's far from strong, but I hope my bedside sympathies suffice to help you moving on. I can't give you any more than that. I don't trust my clumsy feet not to make me fall flat, and the heart's the only muscle tissue, little known fact that don't know how to heal itself if you cut it in half. So don't cut it in half, no, don't. Cut it in half, no, don't. Cut it in half, and I can't give you any more than that. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Emma Langford, folks, and her trumpet. I'm assuming there may still be a bun or two outside if you want to grab them. Obviously, you are welcome to hang around, say hi to each other, all of the rest of it. But the formal bit of the day is over. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you, guys. That was brilliant.